this is Swati. Welcome back. Today we are going to discuss about Scrum framework. What is Scrum? So Scrum is founded on empiricism and lean thinking. So empiricism asserts that knowledge comes from the experience and making decision based on what is observed. Lean thinking reduces waste and focuses on the essential. So Scrum employs an iterative and incremental approach to optimize predictability and to control risk. Scrum engage people who collectively work as a team and have all the skills and expertise to do the work and share to acquire such skills whatever is needed. So Scrum is a lightweight framework which help people, organization, team and help to solve the complex problem. A Scrum team defines with the role of a product owner, a Scrum Master and the developers. So in nutshell, like Scrum Master is there to foster an environment of Scrum within a team, within organization and network, where a product owner work create a order of the work for a complex problem into a backlog. The Scrum team work together to that particular selection of area to convert into DoD and the increment potentially uh, incremental that value software, and the Scrum team and the stakeholder work together, inspect the product on a continuous basis to work on that and get delivered. On a continuous integration and delivery, it follow that. Okay, so Scrum combines of the formal events, four formal events for inspection and adaptation within a containing event. Okay, so all the events whatever we have, Scrum have five events, and all the event will have your inspection and adaptation within that event. Okay, so these event work because they implement the empirical Scrum pillar. What all the Scrum pillar? Transparency, inspection and adaptation. Let's discuss one by one. Transparency. Okay, so the emergent process and work must be visible for those performing the work as well as for those receiving the work. With Scrum, important decisions are based on perceived state of three formal artifacts. Okay, we will look into that. What all the artifacts, and artifacts that have low transparency can lead to decision and that diminish the value and increase risk, right? If we don't have transparency in your artifacts, in your backlog, then definitely the risk area will come up. So transparency is very important, not even a work, everywhere. So transparency enables, how transparency is there, but what it enables? Inspection, and inspection without transparency is waste, right? What is inspection? The Scrum artifacts and the progress toward the agreed goal must be inspected frequently and diligently to detect potentially undesirable variance or problem. To help with inspection, Scrum provide the cadence in the form of five events. So these five events why it has made, so that we can do that inspection frequently, diligently, to protect that risk area and to come up with the potentially deliver incremental product. So inspection enables adaptation. So first we have transparency, we should be transparent enough for that. Then inspection will be there, we will inspect the things, and based on that, if there is any changes, we need to be agile, we need to be flexible. So inspection enable adaptation. So inspection without adaptation is considered pointless. Scrum events are designed to provoke change. So automatically this event is designed in such a way that automatically we have to be agile and we need to adapt that change. The meaning of agile is who is ready to adapt the change, flexible enough, right? What is adaptation? If any aspect of a process deviate outside acceptable limit, or if the resulting product is unacceptable, the process being applied or the material being produced must be adjusted. The adjustment must be made as soon as possible to minimize the further deviation, right? So adaptation becomes more difficult when people involved are not empowered or not self-manageable. So a Scrum team is expected to adapt that moment it learn anything new through that inspection. Scrum team should be self-organized, self-managed, creative people, productive people, flexible and agile, right? What all are the Scrum values? So Scrum values are commitment, focus, openness, commitment, respect. Okay, so successful use of Scrum depends on people becoming more proficient in living these five values: courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. The Scrum team commits to achieving its goal and to supporting each other. Their primary focus is on the work to the sprint to make best possible progress toward this goal. The Scrum team and its stakeholders are open about the work and the challenges. So Scrum team members respect each other to be capable, independent people and are respected as such as the people and whom they work, right? So they should be committed toward the work, whatever the work we should be committed, we should be focused enough what is there, we should be open if there are any problem or blockers are there, and they should respect each other, right? The Scrum team member have the courage to do the right things and speak up whenever it is required and to work on a tough problems. These values give direction to the Scrum team with regard to their work, action and behavior. The decisions that are made and the step taken, the way Scrum is used should be reinforced that these values should not diminished, right? The Scrum team member learn and explore the value as they work with the Scrum events and the artifacts. When these values are embodied by the Scrum team and the people they work with, the empirical Scrum pillars of that is transparency, inspection and adaptation come to the life, which builds the trust. This is applicable anywhere. Who all are the Scrum team? The fundamental unit of that Scrum is a small team of people, right? A Scrum team, the Scrum team consists of one Scrum Master, one product owner and developers. Within a Scrum team, there are no sub teams or hierarchies. Okay. So it is a cohesive unit of professional focused on one objective at a time, right? What is that objective at a time? What they are working? That is your product goal. Because for what we are following this Scrum framework, we have some agenda, right? We have some, and we need to fulfill to reach that milestone. To reach that goal, we have to cross all the milestone. So it is a objective at a time, and all Scrum team, a group of people, professional people, they will focus on a one thing, that is your product goal. So Scrum team are cross functional, meaning that member have all the skill necessary to create value each sprint. They are also self managing, meaning they are internally decide who does what, when and how. The Scrum team is small enough to remain nimble and large enough to complete significant work within a sprint. So typically 10 or fewer people. In general, we have found the smaller team communicate better and are more productive. If a Scrum team become too large, they should consider recognizing into multiple cohesive Scrum team, each focused on the same product. Therefore, they should share the same product goal, product backlog, and product owner. The Scrum team is responsible for all product related activities from stakeholder collaboration, verification, maintenance, operation, experimentation, research, and development, and anything else that they might required, right? So Scrum team and stakeholder, they will collaborate each other, they will inspect the team, they will inspect your product, they will inspect whatever it is related to verifying, maintaining, operation side, experimenting side, research side, development side, whatever it is required. So they are structured and empowered by the organization to manage their own work. Working in sprint at a sustainable pace improves the Scrum team focus and consistency. This is important. We should not work like in one day we are working on multiple user story and next day we are exhausted, right? So it should be a sustainable, constant pace to improve team productivity. The entire Scrum team is accountable for creating a valuable and useful increment every sprint. Scrum defined three specific accountabilities. What are those? This accountabilities, that is nothing but your role, that is your Scrum team. These three accountability responsibility, that is it defines the Scrum team, that is the developers, the product owner, and the Scrum Master. We will look like how who all are the people, your developers, your product owner, and the Scrum Master. And here what all events we have? There are 5 events, right? Sprint, the heart of the Scrum, and it's a container and contains other event, that is the planning, daily stand up, and your review, and the retrospective. Okay, so let's look one by one each role and their responsibilities. So developers are the people in Scrum team. They are committed to creating any aspect of usable increment each sprint. The specific skills needed by developer are often broad and will vary with the domain of work. However, the developers are always accountable for creating a plan for the sprint backlog. What happened when you have what developers will do when your first event will start, right? That is your sprint planning meeting, and they will create a plan for that. Okay, they will pull the backlog, and that will be called the sprint backlog. They will initializing the quality by adhering to the definition of done. So definition of done, that is the uh, 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 that is the parameter. Usually it's a standard set by organization that we are product going to meet, and if it is not done by the organization, then by the Scrum team. Okay, and adapting their plan each day towards the sprint goal. They will track on a daily basis in a daily Scrum, and holding each other accountable as a professional. Okay, the product owner role. The product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. How this is done? It may vary widely across organization, Scrum team, and the individual, but the product owner is accountable for effective product backlog management. Okay, so which includes developing and explicitly communicating the product goal, creating and clearly communicating the product backlog item, ordering the product backlog item, and ensuring that the product backlog is transparent and visible and understood. So product backlog management, what it contains, that it should be communicated, it should be clear, understandable, and it should be ordered based on the value, right, which increase the value of the product, and ensuring it is, transparent and visible and understood by everyone. The product owner may do the work and may delegate this responsibility to others. Regardless, the product owner remains accountable. He can give to any developers, but and end of the day, product owner will be the accountable for this responsibility. So the product owner, to succeed, the entire organization must respect their decision, and these decisions are visible in the content and ordering of the product backlog, and through this, the inspectable increment at the sprint review. So there only they will measure the outcome. The product owner is the one person, not a committee. The product owner may represent the need of many stakeholders in the product backlog, and those wanting to change the product backlog can do so, right, by trying and by talking to the product owner or convince the product owner. So anytime changes can be done, but it will be done with the product owner, and he is the person. Even though if a stakeholder want any changes, that should come to product owner. Multiple question can come, but in your certification or in your interview, but if anything comes up, even the CEO of the company, that should go through the product owner. Whatever changes will be done, whatever will be done in a product backlog, that can be done by convincing with the product owner. So the Scrum Master is accountable for establishing the Scrum as defined in the Scrum guide, right? So there are few, or I mean, it happens, might often happen, like they are taking the Scrum, following the Scrum partially, but that is not going to help, because it is not going to fulfill the agenda of that, and it should be based on the Scrum guide. So in this video, each and everything, all the references you can see in the second last page of this PPT. So the whole reference has been taken by Scrum Guide latest, which is the latest in the market, that is 2020. Okay, so Scrum Master is accountable to establish, foster this environment of Scrum within organization and team, and it should be based as per the Scrum guide. They should do this by helping everyone understand Scrum theory and practice both within the Scrum team and the organization. The Scrum Master is accountable for the Scrum team effectiveness, and they do this by enabling the Scrum team to improve its practices within Scrum framework. The Scrum Master are true leaders who serve the Scrum team and the larger organization. The Scrum Master serves the Scrum team in several ways, including coaching the team member in self-management and cross-functionality, helping the Scrum team focus on creating high-value increments that meet the definition of done, causing the removal of impediments to the Scrum team progress, and ensuring that all Scrum events take place and are positive and productive and kept within the time box. This is most important, like it should be time box, right? The Scrum Master serve the product owner in several ways. So helping and finding the techniques for effective product goal definition and product backlog management, helping the Scrum team understand the need for the clear and concise product backlog item, helping and establish empirical product planning for the complex environment, and facilitating the stakeholder collaboration as requested or needed. The Scrum Master serves the organization in several ways, including leading, training, coaching the organization in Scrum adoption, planning and advising the Scrum impediments within the organization and the team. If any tool issue is there, if any coaching is required, if any facilitation is required for the training or getting the approval, so everything will be taken care by the Scrum Master for the team. Planning and advising for training or anything is required, any impediments and blocker is there, that Scrum Master will take ownership and remove that. Helping the employees and stakeholder understand and enact an empirical approach for complex work. Empirical approach we just discussed, what is the transparency, inspection and adaptation. So it helped the employees as well as stakeholder, that between the Scrum team and stakeholder, they enact, they contact with the approach, and that should be empirical in the nature, right? So removing the blockers, barriers between the stakeholder and the Scrum team as well. Okay, so these are the roles. What all are the events? Let's discuss that. So Scrum events, that is, there are five, right? The sprint, then sprint planning, daily Scrum, and your sprint review and sprint retrospective. So the sprint is a container for all those events, and each event in Scrum is a formal opportunity to inspect and adapt the Scrum artifacts. These events are specifically designed to enable the transparency required, and failure to opt any events as prescribed result is the loss of opportunity to inspect and adapt. So events are used in Scrum to create regularity and to minimize the need for meetings not defined in Scrum. Optimally, all events are held at the same time and place to reduce the complexity. So the sprint is a heartbeat of Scrum, where ideas are turned into values. And what these events will help us? They will help us the need of other meetings and minimize the need, because this will provide us the opportunity to inspect and adapt, and it remove and reduce the complexity, right? And this sprint is a container which contain below these four events. So they are the fixed, so they are fixed length event of 1 month. So this sprint is 1 month or less than that. Usually the sprint will be a 4 week and less than that, and a new sprint start immediately after the conclusion of previous sprint. So all the work necessary to achieve the product goal, including the sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review and sprint retrospective, happen within sprint, right? Which is usually of 2 week to 3 week generally. So during the sprint, no changes are made that would endanger the sprint goal. Once the sprint goal is decided, it cannot be changed. It can be only changing within the sprint planning meeting only, but once the sprint planning is done, sprint goal is finalized, that cannot be changed, and there should not be any changes within these event anytime that should endanger the sprint goal. So quality should not get decreased. So these are the mandatory parameter, that quality should not get decreased. The product backlog is refined whenever it is needed, and scope may be clarified and renegotiated with the product owner as more as it is learned. So what all four parameters are there which is very mandatory? Within sprint, there should not be any changes that should be in danger the sprint goal. The thumb rule is sprint goal should not be in danger anytime. No changes, there should not be any compromise on the quality, and it should not get decreased. Third is the product backlog refinement can be done anytime whenever it is required. Even scope may be clarified, can be do changes renegotiated with the product owner, with the product owner, and whenever it is as more as it is learned by the Scrum team on the product. So sprint enable predictability by ensuring inspection and adaptation of progress towards a product goal at least every month calendar, right? In every sprint, what they do, they go with this process towards the product goal, toward the sprint goal, and they can validate whether it is there is any danger or we are on a good note and path, and that predictability you can get to know every month in every sprint. So when a sprint horizon will be too long, then what happens? The sprint goal may become invalid. Why? Because complexity may increase, risk may increase, and these complexity and risk may increase, then it will endanger your sprint goal. If the sprint is shorter, then complexity will be less, it can be resolved, risk may be less, mitigation plan should be there, and your goal can be achievable. So shorter sprint can employ to generate and more learning cycle and limit the risk of cost and effort to a smaller time frame. So time frame will be also smaller, there will be hold on your cost, and risk will be less. Each sprint may be considered a short project only. Okay, so various practices exist to forecast progress, like burn down chart, burn up chart of cumulative flows. So these burn down, burn up chart, what is this burn down and burn up chart? Like remaining work will be in a sprint will be the burn down chart, the completed work or any additional work has been added will be your burn up chart. Like that, cumulative flows. So in this Scrum we follow this burn down and burn up chart, and cumulative flow we follow on the Kanban board, right? So while proven useful, these do not replace the importance of, even though we have these matrices, these do not replace the importance of your empiricism, which we have seen. And in complex environment, we will what will happen to be unknown, that only what has already happened that will be known and may be used for can be used for forward looking a decision, make a decision for making the happen on the DoD. And a sprint could be cancelled if a sprint goal become obsolete, even though it is very rare, but sprint can cancel if a sprint goal become worthless and obsolete. Only a product owner has this authority to cancel the sprint. So what all are the remaining events? Now first is sprint planning. So sprint planning initiate the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. This resulting plan is created by the collaborative work of the Scrum team. So this is sprint planning who initiate, this will be done by the Scrum team, and if any technical advice can be taken, they can call out that person in that meeting. The product owner ensure that attendees are prepared to discuss most important product backlog item and how they map to the product goal. The Scrum team may also invite other people to attend that sprint planning to provide the advice, right? And the sprint planning addresses the what all topic they will address. Sprint planning: why is the sprint is this sprint is valuable, what can be done in this sprint, and how will the chosen work get done. So the product owner proposes how the product could increase its value and utility in current sprint. The whole Scrum team then collaborate to define the sprint goal that communicates why the sprint is valuable to the stakeholder. The sprint goal must be finalized prior to the end of the sprint planning. And what can be done this sprint: though discussion with the product owner, the developer select that item from the product backlog to include the current sprint. So how this will be done in the sprint? the with the discussion of the product owner, the developer will pull the product backlog item for the current sprint, to include in the current sprint, and the Scrum team may refine these items during this process, where the sizing estimation will be done, and which increase the understanding and confidence, right? Selecting how much can be completed within the sprint may be challenging, but however, the more developer know about their past performance and their upcoming capacity and their definition of done, the more confident they will be in choosing their sprint forecast. So how they do, they each selected product backlog item, the developer plan the work necessary, whatever is necessary to create an increment and meet the definition of done. And this is often done by decomposing the product backlog item into the smaller work item of 1 day or less, right? So when they break the product backlog item, and they will include in the sprint backlog item, so they do this thing sizing and all in the refinement, and use epic will be divided into the different smaller chunks of the work to the user story, tasks and issues, right? And it should be done, user story means item should be done, smaller item, it should be like that it should be completed 1 day or less than that. So how this will be done at this sole direction of the developer, no one else tell them that how this product backlog item into turns into the increment of value, they will only decide into that. Okay, so the sprint goal, the product backlog item, select what is your sprint goal, then the product backlog item selected for the sprint plus the plan how to deliver them together is referred to the sprint backlog. Yes, correct. So what your sprint backlog contains, for what Scrum team did, they decide sprint goal, and then they pull the product backlog item and how they will deliver this plan to as a DOD, and together sprint goal, their PBIs into the current sprint, and their plan is referred to as the sprint backlog. Okay, and what is your sprint goal? Your each milestone. So sprint for particular sprint. The sprint planning is time boxed to maximum of 8 hours for a month sprint, and for shorter sprint the event is usually shorter. It should not exceed more than 8 hours. Next is daily scrum. The purpose of daily scrum is to inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog as necessary. So daily scrum will be to inspect the progress, right? So what I have done today, what I have done, what I am going to do today, what I have done yesterday, and if there is any impediments, there is blockers to do that. So the purpose of daily scrum is to inspect the work towards the sprint goal we have targeted, and adapt if anything is required the sprint backlog as necessary, and adjust the upcoming plan work. So the daily scrum is a 15-minute event for the developers of the Scrum team, and to reduce complexity it is held at the same time and place, in fact all the events. As per Scrum Guide 2020, even in sprint retrospective uh, happen on the same time and same place to reduce complexity. They can definitely do in other place, but uh, uh, to stick on the thing as per Scrum Guide 2020, it all the events should place in the time boxes, same time and same place. of every working day of the sprint. If the product owner or the Scrum Master are actively working on the item in the sprint backlog, then they can participate as the developer. This is again as per Scrum Guide 2020 in daily Scrum. If the product owner and Scrum Master are actively participating in the your backlog item, they can participate. No external people are allowed. The developer can start start with them, and all the people will be there in the daily Scrum. So developer can select whatever structure and technique they want, as long as their daily Scrum focuses on the progress toward the sprint goal, and the produces an actionable plan for the next day of the work. So this is actually inspection of their progress toward the sprint goal, and accordingly they can use their own techniques. This create focus and improve the self management. So daily Scrum improve communication, identify impediments, promote quick decision making, and consequently eliminate the need of the other meeting. The daily Scrum is not only the time for developers are allowed to adjust their plan, they often meet throughout the day for more detailed discussion about adapting and replanning of rest of the sprint workout. But this is a quick meet every day. Next is sprint review. The purpose of sprint review is to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine future adaptation. Okay, so the purpose of sprint review to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine future adaptation, and the Scrum team present the result of their work to key stakeholder, and progress toward the product goal is discussed. So during this event, the Scrum team and the stakeholder review what was accomplished in the sprint and what has changed in their environment. Based on this information, attendees collaborate on what to do next. The product backlog may also be adjusted to meet new opportunities, and the sprint review is a working session. It's the Scrum team should avoid limiting it into the presentation. It is more likely into the demo. So it's a working session and interaction with them. And the sprint review is the second last event of the sprint and is time boxed to a maximum of 4 hours for 1 month sprint. For shorter sprint, the event is usually shorter. Next is sprint retrospective. The purpose of sprint retrospective is to plan a way to increase, qualify the effectiveness, adapt the improvement, and DOT. So the Scrum team inspect how the last sprint went with regards to individual interaction processes and tools and their definition of done. Inspected elements often vary with the domain of work. Assumptions that led them to astray are identified and their origin explored. The Scrum team discuss what went well during the sprint and what problem in encountered and how those problems were resolved. So the Scrum team identify the most helpful changes to improve this effectiveness, and the most impactful improvement are addressed as soon as possible. They may even be added to the sprint backlog for the next sprint. Okay, and the sprint retrospective concludes the sprint, and it is a time box to maximum of 3 hours for a 1 month sprint, and for a shorter sprint the event is usually shorter. Now artifacts. So artifacts are product backlog, sprint backlog, and increments. So what all artifacts we have? So Scrum artifacts represent work or values. They are designed to maximize the transparency of key information. So everyone expecting them has a same basis of adoption. So each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus, again which progresses can be measured. Okay, so what all commitment we have for each artifacts? For a product backlog, it is product goal. For a sprint backlog, it is a sprint goal. And for the increment, it is definition of done. Okay, so these commitment exist to reinforce empiricism and Scrum values for the Scrum team and their stakeholders, what we have seen. So empiricism, transparency, inspection, adaptation, values, your commitment, focus, courage, respect and openness. So we will look one by one, like what is your all three artifacts. So product backlog, the product backlog is an emergent ordered list of what is needed to improve the product. Okay, so you are creating a WhatsApp app. So to create that WhatsApp app, what all things are required? So initially whatever is will be known, it should be given, it will be keep changing, and as per that you will be keep modifying your WhatsApp app, that is your product. Okay, so your product is an emergent and ordered list of what is needed to improve the product, and it is the single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team. The product backlog item that can be done by the Scrum team and within one sprint, and are deemed ready for the selection of the sprint planning event. Okay, so that is your DOR, right? So whatever in the refinement meeting they think that can be added to a sprint backlog in a sprint planning event, that is your DOR, and that product backlog item that can be done, okay, by the Scrum team within one sprint, that will be chosen. They usually acquire this degree of transparency after refining these activities. So your DOR will come into that, okay, which is your deemed to be ready of that particular selection, and it acquired the degree of transparency and they will pull accordingly. Product backlog refinement is an act of breaking down the further defining product backlog item into smaller pieces item, and this is an ongoing activity to add details such as description, order and size, right? So for each item, whatever you will break down into the smaller chunks, what all things will be there? It will be details, description, order and size, and attributes are often vary with the domain of the work. So the developer who will be doing the work are responsible for sizing, and the product owner may influence the developer by helping them to understand and select the trade-offs. So who is responsible to do this refinement activity? Developers are responsible. And if any changes will be required, then the product owner and who means to whom it should be get discussed with the product owner, right? And it can be influenced, the product owner may influence the developer by helping them to understand, like developer are responsible to do that, but if they are getting stuck, then product owner will influence the developer and help them to understand that this is the selected trade-off, this is our agenda, this is what client want, and this is what we want to deliver, right? So the commitment for that particular product goal, that is your the commitment for your product backlog will be your product goal. Product goal is your commitment, right? So the product goal describe the future state of the product which can serve as a target for the Scrum team to plan against, and the product goal is the product come up from the product backlog, right? Your product goal will be where, not come up, actually product goal will be where, your product goal will be within your product backlog only. That's why it's a commitment, right? So you are creating a WhatsApp app, and slowly when you move to multiple sprint, right, so each when you combine all your sprint goal, it will go to the product goal, and from where it has come, from one channel, that is your product backlog, and the rest of the product backlog emerges to define what will be fulfilled. That will be product goal only, right? So your product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has a clear boundary, what you need to do, a known stakeholder, well-defined user or customer, and the product could be service, a physical product, or something, online or software, more abstract on that. The product goal is a long term objective of the scrum, because multiple sprints are there, so it's a long term, and they must fulfill one objective before taking the next item. So if you are on one sprint, there should be one deployment, and then only you should move next. If anything is remaining, that will be move into the next sprint. Next artifact is sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is composed of sprint goal. Why? Because the set of product backlog item PBI selected for that sprint, as well as actionable plan to be delivering the increment, right? So that is your sprint backlog, and is a plan by and for the developers. It is highly visible real-time picture of the work that developer plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal, and consequently the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint as more is learned. It should have the enough detail that they can inspect their progress in the daily scrum, right? Your sprint backlog can be get updated in your daily scrum. What is the commitment for sprint backlog? That is the sprint goal. The sprint goal is a single objective of the sprint. Although the sprint goal is a commitment by the developers, it provides a flexibility in terms of exact work needed to achieve it. The sprint goal also creates coherence and focus, encouraging the Scrum team to work together rather than on a separate initiative. The sprint goal is created during the sprint planning event and then added to the sprint backlog. As the developer work during the sprint, they keep the sprint goal in the mind, and if the work turns into the different, they are expected, they collaborate with the product owner to negotiate on the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. Okay, so what is your agenda, means what is your um, uh, uh, agenda you did, that when you have created the sprint goal, it cannot be endangered. It is created in the sprint planning event only and added to the sprint backlog, and as developers start working on that particular sprint, they will keep this sprint goal in the mind, and they will turn this selected work and the item based on the as per the sprint goal, and they collaborate with the product owner if there is any changes will come up with any person, right? Or if they learn anything, or if client will ask, or company managers will ask anybody, they will collaborate with the product owner to negotiate on the scope, how to do that, how to reach that, and based on that they will do changes in the sprint backlog. That will happen within the sprint only, but without affecting the sprint goal. It should not get in danger. Okay, next, the last artifact is increment, right? So an increment is a concrete stepping stone towards the product goal. Your increment, every sprint you are giving the DOD definition of done, that is your increment, and you are complementing your increment in each and every sprint, right? And each milestone will combine together, where you will reach each milestone is a stepping stone towards your final, and that is your product goal. And each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly verified, ensuring that all increment work together, and in order to provide value, an increment must be usable, right? So multiple increments may be created within the sprint. The sum of the multiple deployments can be done within the sprint, and the sum of the increment is presented at the sprint review, thus supporting the empiricism. However, an increment may be delivered to the stakeholder prior to the end of a sprint also, before the sprint review also, because the sprint review should not never be considered as a gate of releasing value. It can be done anytime. And to release uh, uh, the software, product owner will take a decision on that. So work cannot be considered a part of increment unless it meets the definition of done. Your definition of done is the commitment of increment. The definition of done is a formal description of a state of the increment when it meets the quality measured required for the product. And the moment of product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. When your PBIs meet the DOD, you are with the deployment, can do the deployment, and your increment is born. The definition of done creates transparency by providing everyone a shared understanding of what work has completed as a part of increment. And if the product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review meeting. Instead, it returns to the product backlog for the future consideration. So if the definition of done of an increment is a part of a standard of the organization, then all the Scrum team must follow it at a minimum level. And if it is not an organizational standard, then Scrum team must create a definition of done appropriate for the product, the entire Scrum team, right? And the developer are required to conform the definition of done. If there are multiple Scrum team working together on a product, they must mutually define and comply to with the same definition of done. So if you have one Scrum team, the Scrum team will take decision. If you have multiple Scrum team, then multiple Scrum team will be mutually defined that DOD. DOD should be the same of the final product for entire multiple Scrum team, and dependency should be less on that. Okay. So this is the overall your Scrum project management and Scrum overview for your Scrum event, right? Let's have a quick revision on that. So your Scrum event will be sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective. What all the time boxes of that? Your sprint will be 1 month or less than that. Your sprint planning will be 8 hours, daily Scrum will be 15 minutes, sprint review will be 4 hours, and sprint retrospective will be 3 hours. Who all can attend this thing? So only in your sprint planning can be additional people can be optional attendees can be come in the sprint planning, no other events, right? And who all are will be the attendee in the sprint? So definitely in sprint, because it is the overall the container, so Scrum team and the stakeholder. Sprint planning will be only Scrum team, daily Scrum will be developers, sprint review will be the again Scrum team and the stakeholders, and sprint retrospective will be Scrum team. And what is the purpose of these events, right? So in your sprint, what all things in sprint will be having your sprint goal, multiple sprint will be having your multiple sprint goal will combine, that is your product goal, and that is your increment. This is the purpose of entire sprint, right? When your PBIs convert in when your all PBIs get completed, then your increments get born, convert into the completion, your increments come up. So your sprint will be having the sprint goal, multiple sprint will be your product goal, and then your increment. So sprint goal, product goal, and the increment, this is the purpose what we have seen the commitment. So actually what is the sprint? It is the purpose, that is your commitment of the artifacts, those three artifacts which we gone through just now. purpose of sprint planning, that the planning of the sprint, that is you are defining the sprint goal, right? And then it's planned how to do that, plus the sprint backlog. Daily scrum, inspecting the progress and for the next 24 hours and updating the sprint backlog. Sprint review, inspecting the increment, right, and adapting the product backlog. So you are seeing the inspecting what increment, your DOD, your outcome, and adapting based on that product backlog, because whatever will be remaining, it will go to the product backlog. Who will decide where it will be, whether the current sprint backlog or the next to next sprint backlog? That will be taken decision by the product owner, who will add it the product backlog. In a sprint retrospective, they will inspect on the development process. Okay, so they will look into the what all inspection based on the individual interaction processes and tool, that is the entire development process, and identify the most improvement and adapt that definition of done, right? So they will choose most improvement which is helpful, it will add it there and adapt the definition of done. What all input and output we have given to these event. So input will be in sprint planning, your past performance, right? Your product backlog, from where they will pull the item, your past performance and upcoming capacity and the definition of done. These three things we have already seen in the previous sprint, right? And your product backlog. Now in daily scrum, your sprint goal status monitored by the development team. So what is the input there? Input is the your sprint goal, because they will monitor that status, right? Progress, that status, how they are doing. So that is your input here. In sprint review, the outcome of the sprint review, right? And the product backlog and the business condition, because product owner will do the market research, look into that. Based on that, he will take decision on release part, cost part, right? And time and costing, time to the market, these things will be uncertainty part, this thing will be taken care by the product owner, right? So sprint retrospective, the individual interaction processes and tool and the definition of done. So input, what we have seen, planning, sprint planning, your product backlog, and your three things, past performance, upcoming forecast or capacity, and your definition of done. Daily scrum, sprint goal, you are input giving a sprint goal. Review your outcome, right? And your product backlog which is getting changed. And retrospective, definition of done will be by default, and individual and interaction, right? And processes and tools, the first manifesto of the agile. Output, what is the output, what outcome you are getting? So in your sprint, you are getting the product output. Each sprint is what they are giving, each increment, right? Product increment. Sprint planning, you're giving a sprint backlog and the sprint goal. Okay, daily scrum, updated sprint backlog and scope in anything added. Sprint review, updated product backlog and the sprint outcome. And sprint retrospective, the adapted definition of done, if any improvement what has been added, and added to the particular sprint or a product, right? So it can be added, your most improvement thing, or adoption DoD, usually it added into the sprint backlog, the current sprint backlog, but it can be a product backlog and then pull into the sprint backlog, right? Then Scrum team, we have three roles, right? Developer, product owner, and Scrum Master. And Scrum team, what they will do, they collaborate to reach the sprint goal. Each sprint they collaborate with the stakeholder. Anytime they can collaborate, there is no foundation that only sprint review or any particular meeting. Anytime, whenever it is required, they collaborate. Entire Scrum team can collaborate with the stakeholder, and in sprint they reach to the sprint goal, right? In sprint planning, they define the sprint goal. What Scrum team do, because in Delhi Scrum only developers are there, no Scrum team. So next is review, sprint review, then collaborate with the stakeholder, and sprint retrospective, collaborate to identify the improvements, right? What developer do, they build the increment, create the sprint forecast and plan, and update the sprint backlog. So all sprint work is by and for the developer. They only build the increment, they create the sprint forecast and plan, and they update the sprint backlog. Product owner manage the product backlog, management of product backlog item, and collaborate with the developers. And Scrum Master, that established Scrum Master established the Scrum, ensure the meeting happens and everyone understand the purpose, and that what is this Scrum, why we are following that, how beneficial it is. So it will establish the Scrum within team and organization and ensure that every meeting should happen, everyone should join, and everybody understand the purpose, respect that, and meeting and event should be positive, productive, and within time box. Okay, this is the overall uh, entire, I mean to say, the whole theory of the Scrum. Okay, so technical depth and cone of uncertainty. So technical depth is also known as design depth and a cone depth, right? For example, if one developer is working on a particular, layout or a website, and a client has asked to do some modification, he has done that. Client has asked to put some additional logo, and he need to take off due to some urgency and going back, and some other developer has taken ownership and doing that. And when the first developer has not kept the things organized, code is not in place, commented properly, the other developer will take more time to do that same thing, which can be done in 1 hour, it might take 3 hours, right? So that is your code depth, design depth, and the technical depth. So whatever is unresolved technical aspect for the past come back, and that is haunting you today, that is your technical depth. And often changes of the product, when your requirement is keep changing, and due to time constraint, if you are taking any shortcut to do those changes and not properly, you know uh, manage that, then your debt can take place. So these technical issues is not simple, and we need to be more organized to deal with that. And solving this technical issue is not always as simple, and to putting in a file and folder as I have written, this will cause a technical debt. So what we need to do, so we need to track this thing on a regular basis, and software tools, and which can be measure the code coverage and track the complexity of the code. If there is any issue, they will resolve that, manage that by organizing that. Okay, keep commenting that, and a particular folder it should be there, and organize and handed over to the other person properly, so that it should take the less time. Okay, now the code of uncertainty, the term code, cone of uncertainty is used for the software development, where technical and business environment are constantly evolving. So at the start of the project, comparatively little will be known, and the product owner work result and uncertainty will be high. And as more it is learned, uncertainty tend to decrease. So assume a cone, your cone is like a V shape, right? So little thing is known, and as the work is we are following the work and giving the result, so uncertainty will be get decreased. Initially it will be more, and slowly it will be get decreased, and one side of the cone of the axis will be technical step, and other will be how it will matching and raise the business environment and the value, how it will go to the time to market, and it will reduce. And that graph, parabologram is your cone of uncertainty, where your software development will be technical and business value will go constantly, and it will evolve and emerge constantly and give output. Okay, so we have seen the Scrum rule, right? One product, one product means one product backlog. One product backlog means one product owner. A CT scanner machine is there. You have a one product, right? For that one product, you have one product backlog, and one product backlog, one product owner. Okay, one product means one product owner. If you have one product, then one product owner, one product backlog, and one team will have the product owner, Scrum Master, and the developer. Now, a product owner can work on a if two products are there, right? If you have one product, then one product backlog and one product owner. If you have two product, then two product backlog and two product owner can be one product owner. Okay, this is your Scrum rule. Nexus framework and Scrum scaling, same way what we are following, all the events, all the artifacts, it will go multiple Scrum team work together. They have own product backlog, right? A CT scanner machine is there, that is a final product. Each module will be there: cardiac functional module, brain module, right? Stomach area module, back area module. So each module, they have multiple module, so multiple module, each there will be having, yeah, so each will be considered as a separate product. Okay, and when they combine together, it will be a one product, right? So this is considered as one product, that is a CT scanner machine. So one product owner will be there. He will monitor the entire Scrum team, so that there should not be any complexity or any variation in terms of DoD, and dependency should be less. So each product will be having, each module will be having own product backlog. Based on that, they will work. They will be having their own sprint length, right? And the final, the only the thing, the increment for each DoD should be same, and dependency should not be there. So they will be having, so each usually one representative will meet occasionally, and they will work on that Nexus sprint planning, Nexus sprint backlog, and based on that they integrate the team. They frequently work in a daily scrum. Also, they have Nexus daily scrum, and they have Nexus sprint review, and then they have Nexus sprint retrospective, so that they can think when they will merge all the module, how the module will, on the final product, and their definition of the an increment will be same, and integrated increment should be come up, and it will be monitored, and with one representative or combined also. That is called Nexus framework and a Scrum scaling, where the multiple Scrum team work together to build a final increment and trace the product value. Okay, so Scrum is free and offered in a Scrum guide. So I'll recommend, please go through the website of scrum.org and read this Scrum guide, and I'll highly recommend to go on that. And the Scrum framework is actually outlined here in a Scrum guide, and implementing only a part of it is not possible, and it will not result perfectly. So internally, Scrum guide should be understandable enough, so that all function well as a container, and it can be useful in any technique, methodology, and practice we are following. And once you go through the Scrum guide, as more as you read this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, it will be more understandable, and it will be really helpful to clear even the certification exam, and any exam you are opting, whether from scrum.org or from Alliance, whether for professional Scrum Master or a certified Scrum Master. But Scrum guide will be same, and it is highly recommended to go through that when you go to this scrum.org, because I have done certification from here. So as far as I know, more aware on that, so you can download the Scrum guide from here. Go to the Scrum groceries, each and every term, it will be easily understandable. You can go through that, and you can give the free exam also. Thank you so much, and please like and subscribe. Click on bell icon if you have liked, and feel free to go to my full portfolio and visit my website link, and also my other videos on YouTube channel which I have given on Azure DevOps, Jira, Agile testing, resume preparation, a quick introduction with a presentation, and many more are there, and many more are there to come up. Thank you so much, guys, and see you very soon.